You surely know your astrological sign. You've probably glanced at your horoscope for fun, or taken a more in-depth look if you believe in its predictions. Since the COVID-19 lockdowns, astrology has seen an incredible comeback, particularly with young people. 70% of millennials between 25 and 40 years old say they believe in astrology, including media stars like the singer Dua Lipa.
Let's put it this way.
Okay.
I don't have a therapist, but I have an astrologist.
Astrology is booming on the internet, social media, and cell phone apps. It's brought good fortune to businesses too, generating an estimated $40 million in revenue annually. But can we really trust the stars to better understand ourselves, to discover our destiny, or to find our soulmate, as portrayed in the reality show Cosmic Love? We met with some astrologers to understand the assumptions behind astrology and how the stars might influence human beings.
As above, so below is the axiom of astrology. Each planet represents a different part of your being.
Some people say doing astrology can be a science because you've got the rules of interpretation which you can follow.
So does astrology provide a level of vitality, connection, and thriving in the person's life who employs it? That's all we need to worry about.
We interviewed historians to find out when astrology first appeared. For how long have we consulted the stars to make decisions, and how much has astrology influenced historical events?
All Roman emperors used astrologers at one point or another.
In the early modern Europe, about 1 in 3 families had access to a prognostication.
What do scientists think of the techniques used in astrology, considered the queen of sciences in ancient times?
Astrologers don't bother to question the foundations of their methods. They adhere to old age practices. Our forefathers decided it thus, and we shall follow them.
But today, astrology no longer follows the actual positions of the zodiac constellations, totally distorting the horoscope calendar. So, why are so many people still receptive to its predictions?
It's the desire to know where you're at, to believe the stars are telling you something you can identify with. We call it selection bias.
Can our natal chart truly plot the trajectory of our entire life? Why is astrology making a comeback with millennials?
And when you talk to millennials, over half of them say that their peers value astrology more than religion.
We've come back to paganism, the great whole.
Astrologers, scientists, historians, sociologists, through different voices and different points of view, we attempt to answer the question: is astrology real? But first of all, what is astrology? And how does it work? To find out more about this universe, we head to New York to meet Rebecca Gordon, one of America's leading astrologers. Rebecca will help us to understand one fundamental element: our natal chart.
A natal chart is a snapshot of the sky at the exact moment you were born. Every natal chart is completely unique. The sky in the entire history of the universe will never, ever be in the same shape it is at the exact time you were born.
A natal chart is far more complex than a horoscope. To create this kind of cosmic identity card, an astrologer needs to know your date, exact time, and place of birth. Let's take the case of someone born on January 16, 1987 at 4:15 a.m. in Paris. With this data, Rebecca can find out several important pieces of information. First, she draws a line from your birthplace on Earth towards the sun and sees where in the zodiac this line ends. The zodiac is a band of 12 constellations of stars that revolve around our solar system. In the present case, this line points to the constellation of Capricorn, so Capricorn is the sun sign of our subject.
The sun sign is, say, when somebody says to you, say, are you an Aries? Are you a Virgo? What they're really saying is the sun appeared to be in the sign of Aries when you were born.
Astrologers use a method that dates back thousands of years. The next step is to determine the ascendant sign. To do so, they must identify the constellation that was rising on the horizon at the exact moment our subject was born, using tables called ephemerides, which list the movements of stars and planets. On January 16th at 4:15 a.m. in Paris, the constellation of Scorpio was rising. Therefore, our subject's ascendant is Scorpio.
The ascendant, otherwise known as the rising sign, imbues upon you a certain field of energy. So, for example, if you were a Leo rising, that sign of Leo would color your life.
Rebecca then places the planets in your natal chart in the exact position they occupied in the solar system at the time you were born. In astrology, each of the planets represents an aspect of our personality.
The natal chart is a snapshot of the sky at the exact moment you were born. As above, so below is the axiom of astrology. And we can look at the planets as all parts of you. Each planet represents a different part of your being. The sun, which is the center of the solar system, is perhaps the main character in your play. The sun represents your ego. Venus represents the heart, your love. The moon represents your emotional body. Mars represents your power and your drive. I should add that Mercury, the planet of communication, is the conductor of the orchestra. And this pertains to the way that you speak, how you write, your intonation. That is Mercury. The planets that are closest to the sun resonate more intimately with the aspects of your personality.
Once the planets are placed, astrologers add elements to refine the meanings of each celestial body in your natal chart. They start with the houses. The sky is divided into 12 equal parts, numbered counterclockwise, starting from the ascendant. Each part is a house representing a specific area of our life: health, money, family, professional life. These houses shed more light on the planets located within them.
The planets are most important. In fact, the signs and the houses that they are positioned in is so unique to who you are, your personality. Now, each planet represents a certain part of your being, and the sign and the house it shows up in your chart will modify the nature of that planet.
Astrologers examine the angles formed between the various celestial bodies. These relationships, that they call aspects, enable them to perform a more detailed reading of the planet's influence on our personality.
The aspects are a key element in astrology. The aspects show me how one part of you speaks to another part of you. The aspects in astrology symbolize the paths in which the planets speak to each other. So as astrologers, we see the chart, and the chart tells us a story, but it's important that we as astrologers engage with our client and understand how they are meeting the dynamics of their birth sky.
The natal chart is now complete. For astrologers, it is a vital tool. The position of the planets in the houses and the relationship between the stars is important information when it comes to defining the character traits attributed to us by the stars at the moment of our birth.
A natal chart can tell me a lot about your predispositions. It can tell me about your strengths in life, what your challenges will be. It can also tell me your luck, the tools you have to overcome your challenges, Your natal chart is like a soundtrack. At the exact moment you were born, that shape of the cosmos is embedded in your soul, and you are broadcasting that out to the world every second of your life. That specific sky map lives within you and is always emanating from your being. So you will always have your natal chart. That never changes. However, the sky at any given moment will speak to the aspects in your natal chart. Some years might be harder, some years might be easier.
Thanks to these natal charts, Rebecca says she can reveal who we are and what we'll experience over time. But where does this technique come from? And on what foundations is it built? We head to the Middle East in present-day Iraq. This is where the first human writing appeared, 3,000 years BCE, at the heart of a sophisticated society whose capital's name still captivates, Babylon. Victor Giesenberg, a researcher specialized in the history of this period, studied the earliest text inscribed on clay tablets, in which astrology holds a particularly significant place. Its first recorded appearance dates back to the 7th century BCE.
We have texts. They're called the Tablet of Amitseduka. Amitseduka was a Mesopotamian ruler, a successor of the king Hammurabi of Babylon. Under his reign, there were studies of the motions of the planets. There were 700 years of continuous observations of the planetary motions by the Babylonians and Assyrians. What we have as evidence is about 1,000 cuneiform tablets, 1,000 clay tablets where they wrote their observations, and this is only a very small fraction of the total observations they made over those centuries.
Laila Haddad, journalist and author specialized in the history of astronomy, is passionate about the connections humans maintained with the cosmos, particularly in Mesopotamia.
Marduk created the heavens and the earth. He built the heavenly vault, positioned the stars. This was a divine act. So any unusual event was interpreted as a direct message from Marduk.
The common belief was that the gods of Babylonia and Assyria communicated with the humans through signs. And one type of signs was the heavenly writing, the writing in the heavens. So they made lists of signs, and they said, if A, then B. For instance, if there is an eclipse in the west, then this is very good or very bad for the kingdom.
After watching the sky for hundreds of years and noting their observations, Babylonian priests laid the foundations of astrology, and that began with the zodiac.
They identified the constellations, at the heart of which circulated the 5 planets visible to the naked eye, the moon and the sun. The zodiac is like a path of the gods.
The path followed by the planets, the moon, and the sun is known as the ecliptic. The band of zodiac constellations frame this line. The Babylonians would push their understanding further.
To achieve greater precision, they superimposed a kind of ruler over the sky, dividing it into 12 equal rectangles of 30 degrees, each section containing a part or the entirety of one of the constellations. This system allowed for much more specific celestial positioning. We could say it is 25 degrees in the sign of Capricorn, far more precise than near the head of Capricorn or between its front and back legs.
This technique aimed to enhance the accuracy of the priestly astrologers' predictions, exclusively tailored for the ruling monarch as a guide to manage the kingdom's affairs. In the 6th century BCE, the Persians invaded Mesopotamia and disrupted the established Babylonian societal structures. The priestly astrologers lost their political authority.
At this point, Babylon was no longer the illustrious center of Marduk's dominance. The priests found their services in lesser demand. They earned a living by observing, drawing up reports. I don't know who it was, but one very shrewd priest created the personal horoscope.
They start calculating the configuration of all the astral bodies and basing their predictions on this. There are innovations that are introduced by the Babylonians and that go on. There is exaltations and aspects which are still studied today by astrologers.
After the fall of Babylon, the priestly astrologers went into exile, traveling to neighboring regions. Thus, astrology was disseminated throughout the Mediterranean, where it was enriched by contact with other cultures. In Egypt, it incorporated the concept of decans. And in ancient Greece, where Hellenic scholars embraced it, Plato introduced a fundamental notion, the idea of a correspondence between the cosmos and Earth.
For Plato, the idea was clear. Humans are a microcosm, while the universe is the macrocosm. As microcosms, humans are inherently connected to the grand cosmos. Given that the sun and moon demonstrably influence earthly phenomena, the entire celestial sphere exerts influence, and the cosmos governs all processes: birth, death, decay, and growth, laying the foundation for astrology as we recognize it today.
This notion of correspondence between the cosmos and humans forms the cornerstone of astrology, and the Greeks significantly sharpened the system and techniques initially developed by the Mesopotamians.
Greek scholars contributed to the general practice of astrology, first of all by refining the planetary models. They provided certain more accurate ways of describing and predicting the planets' positions and motions. They refined the system of aspects. One good example of a Greek innovation in astrological technique is the 12 houses. These do not appear before Greek texts. It's a system of 12 places along the zodiac where the planets have a stronger influence or a special influence.
No one fully understands the origins of the astrological technique of houses. It appears for the first time in a text that is still significant for astrology today. Tetrabiblos by Claudius Ptolemy that consolidates all Greek astrological knowledge.
Tetrabiblos is certainly a contribution of the Greeks, that they provided a system that was more consistent. This is why he had such long-lasting influence.
At this point, the techniques and foundations of Western astrology were firmly established. Astrologers no longer had priestly roles, and their predictions were no longer reserved exclusively for kings and the powerful.
Astrology was used for major life events by private individuals. A major life event could be the birth of a child, it could be the decision to marry someone, it could be a business undertaking. These were good moments to consult an astrologer, which was clearly rather expensive. On the other hand, the kings and emperors continued to use these astrologers among other sources of information. And we can say that most and almost all Roman emperors used astrologers at one point or another.
Astrology seduced Rome and spread to the far reaches of Europe, following the routes of the empire. Archaeologists even found several Greco-Egyptian astrological tablets in the Vosges, dating back to the 3rd century CE. This is what astrological charts looked like at the time. At the center, the sun; in the first circle, the signs of the zodiac; in the second circle, the houses. All that remained was to position the planets like pieces on a game board.
These were used by practicing astrologers to show their client, here are the planets, and then they would explain what it means. The client could visually see on the tablets what the calculations were.
Astrology established itself in Europe. Considered the queen of sciences, practitioners were highly respected, and yet it would fall into decline and be repudiated. Why and how was astrology doomed to disappear? And who were its detractors? At the start of the Middle Ages, astrology coexisted with the emerging Christian religion. From the beginning of the 15th century, it was taught in universities. The influence and popularity of astrology would spread thanks to an invention: Gutenberg's printing press. Steven van den Broek, a professor specializing in 16th and 17th century history at Ghent University in Belgium, has delved into the immense popularity of astrology during this era. Annual predictions were sold as much to public officials as to private individuals.
About 1 in 4 to 1 in 3 families had access to a prognostication. So this was very widely distributed.
Astrology existed in nearly every household and also in all royal courts. Astrologers were respected scholars who had mastered math, astronomy, and often medicine, like one of the most well-known figures even today, Nostradamus.
We know that when Nostradamus' career as an astrological practitioner takes off in the 1550s in Provence, we know that it does so because he is issuing these almanacs and these prognostications. He adds these little refrains, these quatrains. Nostradamus was exceptionally well regarded, at least in the 1550s, early 1560s, at the French court. So Nostradamus is a very good example of how you can cross that boundary and how you can play with that boundary between prognostication on the one hand and prophecy, inspired prophecy on the other hand. Of course, this is also a very dangerous game to play, all right? Who exactly is inspiring you? Is it God or is it a demon?
Astrology was at its peak, yet within 50 years, it would fall into decline. First, its growing influence began to pose a problem for the Catholic Church, already weakened and threatened by the emergence of competing Protestant churches. A new witch hunt was about to begin.
There is a lot more concern about the purity of Christian practice. Being a good Christian, not being a heretic, not being a pagan. So what you see in the late 16th century and early 17th century is that inside each of these churches, the level of suspicion towards astrology is increasing because they are afraid that somehow the form of Christianity they represent may not be as pure as they thought it might be.
Distrusted by the church, astrology would soon be shaken up by another revolution, a scientific one this time. This marked the beginning of its divorce from the world of science. It began in 1609 when Galileo had the first astronomical telescope built and discovered that the planets orbit the sun rather than the Earth, as was previously believed. A new scientific era dawned, bringing with it new tools and methods. Philip Zarka is an astronomer. Like all scientists, he is very critical of the techniques and foundations of astrology, which have been undermined since the discoveries of that era.
In the 17th century, there was a revolution in the science of the heavens, notably due to the advent of the spyglass and the telescope. Then Newton sought to explain the movements of celestial bodies, and the law of gravity was formed. Newton concluded that the universe must be infinite, or else, if it were finite, it would implode toward its center.
The planets orbit the sun. The cosmos is infinite. Humanity's vision of space was revolutionized by these discoveries. However, astrologers refused to question the techniques and knowledge inherited from their illustrious Greek predecessors. Astrology would also be shooken up by the emerging methods of modern science.
In the 17th century, a new way of doing science emerged, starting with facts and establishing laws, deductions, and observations from them. This totally opposed the method of astrological practice, which assumed that the movement of celestial bodies, in particular the planets, the moon, and the sun, governed earthly events and human psychology. Astrology almost never tried to test its predictions or check whether they were contradicted or disproven by facts.
With these new scientific criteria, astrology was no longer considered an exact science. And the astrologer's sky, inherited from the scholars of ancient times, had nothing in common with that of modern astronomers.
There are constellations used to navigate the sky. Astronomers have identified 88 of them across the entire heavenly vault. Astrologers focus on 12, all within the zodiac band. In reality, there aren't 12 but 13 constellations, the 13th being Ophiuchus, also known as the Serpent Bearer.
The decision to exclude Ophiuchus was made by Mesopotamian priests at the beginning of astrology. The intention was perhaps to simplify things or to align the zodiac with the 12 annual lunar phases. But this isn't the only deviation astrology made from the actual positions of the stars.
We should also note that these constellations have very diverse widths throughout the zodiac. Some span barely 10 degrees, others over 50 or 60 degrees.
This difference in width has a significant impact on the amount of time the sun really spends in each of the zodiac's constellations, and consequently on the duration of our sun signs. The wider a constellation, the longer the sun remains within it. Conversely, the narrower a constellation, the shorter the time the sun spends there. Here are the true widths of the zodiac constellations. Some constellations are very small, such as Scorpio, which is actually behind the sun for only 9 days. Others are much larger, like Virgo, which spends 44 days there. Lastly, an important factor not taken into account by astrology, the shift of the zodiac constellations caused by the movement of the Earth's axis.
And there's another, more complicated issue. They had to define a reference point, preferably within the zodiac band. The reference point used in a specific moment when Earth's axis of rotation is perpendicular to the direction of the sun. This only happens twice a year, during the spring equinox and the autumn equinox. By convention, the spring equinox was chosen as the starting point for the zodiac signs. At the time this system was established, the spring equinox coincided with the beginning of the constellation Aries. As a result, the zodiac was divided into 12 signs, starting with Aries, followed by the next constellation, Pisces, Aquarius, and so on. That would all be fine and would never change if the Earth were a perfect sphere. But it isn't, and because of the forces of the tidal forces exerted by the sun and the moon on the Earth, there is a tidal bulge at the equator, the equatorial bulge. The gravitational forces of the sun and the moon always pull this bulge back into the plane of Earth's orbit. This causes the Earth's rotational axis to move like a spinning top.
This spinning motion causes a slow shift in the positions of the zodiac constellations. This phenomenon is called the precession of the equinoxes. Approximately every 2,000 years, the spring equinox shifts back to the previous constellation.
This means that today, 3,000 to 4,000 years after the beginnings of astrology, the starting point of the zodiac, originally at the beginning of the constellation of Aries, is now crossing Pisces and will soon enter Aquarius. As a result, the zodiac signs no longer correspond to their original background constellations.
Today, at the time of the spring equinox, it is actually the constellation of Pisces that is behind the sun. However, for astrologers, it is still considered to be the sign of Aries. This is because they established the zodiac signs according to the seasons, not the actual positions of the constellations.
Astrologers chose to adopt an idealized zodiac, fixed and unchanging over time. This means that the seasons will always align with the same zodiac signs. Thus, astrologers embraced a kind of divorce from the real planets, constellations, and stars that form the actual night sky.
If astrology were based on the actual positions of the stars, taking into account the exact size of the zodiac constellations, including Ophiuchus, and considering the shift caused by the precession of the equinoxes, this is what the true solar sign calendar would look like. Your sign is probably not the one you thought it was. For science, not only are the tools of astrology flawed, but its very foundations are incorrect. Distrusted by religion, criticized by science, one incident would bring an end to astrology. At the end of the 1670s, a poisoning scandal shook the court of Louis XIV. Prominent figures of the nobility were implicated. Under torture, Madame de Montespan and the Marquise de Brevier named Marie-Marguerite Lavoisin as the one who gave them the poison. Lavoisier lived here in Paris, where she made poisons, performed abortions, and was also a renowned astrologer. This presented a perfect opportunity for the church to discredit astrology, evoking black masses and witchcraft. A special tribunal tried and sentenced Lavoisier to death. She was burned alive on February 22, 1680. The final blow to astrology came 2 years later, following this case when a royal edict was published.
The soothsayers, magicians, and enchanters who exploit public credulity under the pretext of horoscopes and divination, abusing the terms of the Holy Scriptures, this deserves banishment.
Astrologers were therefore effectively prohibited from practicing under threat of exile. Astrology found refuge in parlors of occultism hidden from public view. Louis XIV established the Academy of Sciences and funded the creation of the first observatory in Paris. Astronomers continued to make discoveries, further distancing astrology from the sciences.
The observation of the solar system was significantly enhanced thanks to new instruments. In ancient times, only 6 planets were known: Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. These were the planets visible to the naked eye. With the telescope, we discovered Jupiter's moons, Saturn's rings, and more. But we also discovered a 7th planet, Uranus. Neptune was subsequently discovered in the 19th century. Pluto was identified as the 9th planet. For a time, the solar system was thought to consist of these 9 planets. Every time a new planet was discovered, astrologers incorporated it into their body of predictions, saying it would improve their forecasts. However, starting in the 1990s, the most powerful telescopes began detecting new objects similar to Pluto. In 2006, the International Astronomical Union decided, based on scientific criteria, that there are only 8 objects in the solar system that qualify as planets, from Mercury to Neptune. Consequently, Pluto and all the newly discovered objects in the Kuiper Belt were classified as dwarf planets. For astrologers, this raised a problem. Should they incorporate all the dwarf planets or none? Did they lie by including Pluto, or make a huge mistake by not including the dozens of new small planets?
Astrologers decided to retain the 9 celestial bodies of the solar system, including the dwarf planet Pluto, without ever justifying this choice. For astronomers, this is yet another demonstration of the lack of any serious or scientific approach.
Astrologers didn't bother to question the foundations of their practices. They adhered to old-age traditions, simply stating, "That's how it is. Our forefathers decided it would be so, and we shall continue accordingly."
For scientists like Philip Zarka, this is yet another reason why astrology cannot be considered a science. Moreover, there is a final point that, in his view, completely disqualifies astrology, a fundamental critic of its very premise. There is no evidence that the planets have any influence on Earth or its inhabitants apart from the sun and the moon.
We know that tides are linked to the positions of the moon and the sun and can explain and predict them with great precision. The phenomenon has been understood. We could approach astrology in the same way. First, by asking whether, within the vast corpus of physical knowledge accumulated over millennia, especially in recent centuries, is there anything that could explain astrological influence? So we search and investigate. Could gravity provide an explanation? For the planets, it doesn't work, so that rules out gravity. The electromagnetic force is the second and only other force that operates at a distance, but it only applies in the presence of electric charges, positive or negative. Since our world is electrically neutral overall, this can also be ruled out. The weak and strong nuclear forces only operate over very short distances, at the scale of the atomic nucleus. So none of the forces work. That's problematic. Planetary revolutions might generate gravitational waves of very low intensity, which could subtly affect terrestrial events. However, the issue is that we have never detected gravitational waves associated with the movements of the planets. However, in recent years, we have been able to precisely detect gravitational waves caused by the fusion of neutron stars or black holes in our galaxy, so they should have an astrological effect, not the planets. The bottom line is that if we review, with the best possible good faith, all the physical and mathematical tools we have today, nothing can explain the presumed astrological influence.
Despite the opinions of astronomers who undermine the foundations and techniques of astrology, some people continue to believe in it. How has astrology managed to survive these critics? Nick Campion is one of the few astrologers who is also a university history professor. For him, the sophisticated and ancient techniques of astrology are valuable knowledge that remains relevant. It's a matter of perspective.
If we look at whether astrology is a science or not, then we have a problem with the word science. So, a science can be a discipline with its own rules. So, horse racing can be a science. Playing cards can be a science. And in that sense, some people say doing astrology can be a science because you've got the rules of interpretation which you can follow.
There was a major change of technique in 19th century England that saw a huge revolution in astrology. Alan Leo, an astrologer, developed a new concept, a horoscope based solely on the sun sign.
Alan Leo was one of a number of astrologers who argued very strongly for the importance of the sun sign. He incorporates early astrology, but then he adds lots and lots of information that's basically about your soul tendencies.
Alan Leo associated different sun signs with psychological profiles and specific personality traits. He also believed that by focusing solely on the sun and its movements, reliable predictions could be made for each sign. This was an extreme simplification of astrology, but one that also had very practical advantages. First, everyone knows their sun sign. And this simplified form of astrology would become a huge success in a new medium that emerged at the beginning of the 20th century, the daily press. On August 21, 1930, the British newspaper Sunday Express published the sun sign horoscope of Princess Margaret. The public was captivated and eager for more. The rest of the press followed suit. In France, Parissois and Marie Claire published their first horoscopes in 1931.
You read these 40 words, which somehow seem strangely meaningful for you. What they do is they connect you to your birth, they connect you to the zodiac.
For scientists like Daniel Kuntz, who has written several books criticizing astrology, we are seduced by our horoscope for other reasons, manipulated by our brains without realizing it.
This is called selection bias. We spontaneously eliminate what doesn't suit us. And when, on the other hand, something aligns with our idea of ourselves or a situation, we remember it.
In the 1950s, Bertram Forer, an American psychologist and teacher, carried out an experiment with his students to prove this cognitive bias. First, he had the students answer a series of personal questions. He then sent each of them a text supposedly based on their responses. In reality, it was the same text for everyone, constructed using excerpts from horoscopes that Mr. Forer had compiled. Here is an excerpt from the text.
You need to be loved and admired, yet you are critical of yourself. You do have weak points in your personality, but usually manage to overcome these. They were asked to rate it from 0 to 5, with 0 meaning they didn't recognize themselves in the description, and 5 meaning they strongly agreed. The average rating for the 20 students was 4.3. That's huge.
This effect of selection is not the only cognitive bias at play in convincing us of the truth of astrology.
There are also what are called self-fulfilling prophecies. If you're told you'll meet a dark-haired man with blue eyes, You'll be interested in dark-haired men with blue eyes. Despite yourself, you'll act in such a way that these predictions can come true. Such a prediction can really harm people.
I read in my horoscope this morning, risk of accident. So all day, I was like this with the steering wheel, looking right and left. Nothing. I thought perhaps I got it wrong. Just as I flicked through the paper on the seat to check, it happened.
Despite everything, horoscopes continue to attract the public and thus readers. After the war, almost all daily newspapers featured horoscopes, sign by sign as we know them today. The success would revive some scientists' interest in astrology. If we can't identify the cause of the stars' influence on mankind, can we measure its effects? In the 1950s, this question would stimulate the research of a French statistician, Michel Gougelin. The researchers selected hundreds of personalities, all well known in their fields: politicians, actors, sculptors, scientists, and athletes. He created a birth chart for each of them and observed the positions of the planets, which he organized into tables. In the end, it would appear that certain planets do occupy specific positions depending on the profession, with Jupiter being prominent among actors, Saturn among scientists, and Mars among athletes. For Gougelin, his study proved that there is a link between the position of the stars at the time of an individual's birth and their success in a particular field. This was therefore proof of the validity of astrology. His conclusions had a bombshell effect in the world of science.
The astronomical community was taken aback. This was surprising coming from a scientist. He may have wanted to show something extraordinary, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Scientists embarked on a series of counter-experiments following Gougelin's method to retest his study. These were sometimes fueled by a genuine desire to disprove his findings. Jean Rostand, a prominent figure in science, famously declared at the time, "If statistics prove astrology, I will no longer believe in statistics."
Nothing pleases a scientist more without malicious intent than discovering a fact or observation that will destroy the theory of a rival, so to speak, or a colleague.
3 counter-investigations would follow one another over nearly 30 years to test and retest Gougelin's work. In the end, scientists concluded that Gougelin made a mistake by excluding data that did not support his hypothesis.
It was proven that there had been data selection. Data that didn't fit the framework was discarded for reasons that were not objectively valid. Some results were shelved, minimized, or hidden.
These conclusions were published at the start of the 1990s, but Michel Gougelin wasn't able to defend himself. He had died by suicide 10 years earlier. Another scientist, Suzel Fizou-Bresch, embarked on a statistical study, this time based on twins. According to astrology, being born in the same place within a few minutes of each other should have an impact on personality. Let's take the case once more of a person born in Paris on January 16, 1987 at 4:15 a.m. Imagine they had a twin born 20 minutes later. We asked Rebecca to create their astrological chart. In those few minutes, the moon and Jupiter changed houses, which would have consequences on the character of this twin.
And we can see that Jupiter changed house, and you moved into the 4th house. So there's clearly differences. And even though these are both twins, being born about 20 minutes apart will change the entire patterning of life events for each individual. So for example, in this twins chart, the moon is in the 9th house. We could see a greater predisposition towards travel, towards learning and adventure. Now let's move to this other twin who has the moon in the 8th house in Leo. Here is somebody who has a deep emotional awareness and can almost intuit the emotions in the room they walk into. We can see somewhat of an emotional telepathy happening with this person. So as you see, the descriptions are quite different. In that 20 minutes that took place, we have an entirely different focus happening. Now, if we were even to move the chart 3 or 4 minutes, we would still see a difference.
With this in mind, Suzelle Fivou-Bresch studied 251 pairs of twins, creating their birth charts. Based on this, she made a portrait of each twin, which she then presented anonymously to their parents. In 66% of the cases, the parents identified the correct portrait of their child. For the scientists, this was proof of the relevance of astrology. On March 5, 1992, she published her study entitled La Preuve par Dieu.
What greatly alarmed scientists was that she relied heavily on Gauquelin's work, even though, at this point, it was indisputable for any scientist who understood the matter that those statistics had already been questioned and invalidated. Therefore, it seems there was a remarkable lack of caution in her approach.
For scientists, these studies don't in any way change their opinion of astrology.
Following the analysis of causes and effects, we can now say that there is no scientific basis for the practice of astrology.
As for astrologers, the rejection of these studies, particularly Gauquelin's, left them with a bitter taste.
It was a scientism, right? So scientism is the ideology that says that whatever scientists say is true and much better and more true than whatever non-scientists say. And it's just an ideology.
It was the final round with exact sciences. By the late 1960s, astrology shifted to the realm of psychology and symbolism. It experienced a resurgence in popularity with the hippie movement and the New Age, no longer predicting the future, but becoming a life coach, a tool for making decisions. In France in the 1980s, astrology was part of everyday life, in the press, on the radio with Madame Soleil, also at the Élysée Palace, where Elisabeth Tissé advised François Mitterrand. At the same time at the White House, Ronald Reagan was consulting with his astrologer, Joanne Quigley. Despite the criticisms from science and lack of any proof of its effectiveness, astrology continues to gain ground. So what are the mechanisms behind this? Why do people feel that it works despite everything? In the United States in 2022, Libby Rodney conducted a study on astrology through the Harris Poll, revealing fascinating insights.
One of the main teachings was that Americans are placing a lot of value on astrology. 59% of Americans use astrology for health decisions. Another 57% use astrology for relationships, and 40% are using astrology for life choices and career choices. So astrology is kind of on the main stage when it comes to navigating one's life in America today. 95% of Americans know their astrology sign. About 65% of them think it's accurate. So it's pretty popular. In terms of spending, 1/3 of Americans are spending on astrology services. And the average American who is spending on astrology is spending over $800 a year.
And the figures are even more astounding for the generation of 24, 25-year-olds that we call millennials.
83% of millennials are believers in astrology. Their motivation for turning to astrology is to find self-agency and control in a world that's kind of out of control at this moment. 31% of millennials say they turn to astrology to find something bigger than themselves. And when you talk to millennials, over half of them say that their peers value astrology more than religion. 16% of millennials say that astrology has replaced religion for them completely.
Astrology has indeed regained a more spiritual or even religious dimension in the 21st century, reminiscent of its early origins. Millennials have their new generation of astrology stars, such as Colin Bedell.
From 2001 and beyond, many young Americans were feeling like there has to be another way to access spirituality beyond just institutionalized, organized religion. With the real digital revolution, we have this extraordinary opportunity to disseminate astrological information very quickly. I have noticed in my experience that astrology has become a spiritual practice. I also think that it's an art form. I think that it mediates through symbolic language and through metaphor a level of meaning-making and continuity that people are desperately struggling for. Belief is not the arbiter of astrology's efficacy. It's experience. So does astrology provide a level of vitality, connection, and thriving in the person's life who employs it? That's all we need to worry about.
In today's selfie-centric world, astrology offers a way for individuals to position themselves at the center of the universe, seeking personal answers to a chaotic world. The question of whether one can truly believe in astrology depends largely on where we're coming from. If you are a scientist,
can we really believe in astrology? Yes. The proof? Many people do. Should we really believe in astrology? In my opinion, the answer is no. Because I think that believing in something known and fairly well proven to be untrue is never very healthy.
or an astrologer.
Astrology is partly a work of the imagination. I don't mean to say by that it's not real, it's just that it depends on astrologers creating meaningful symbols. For the people who've read it, they're feeling there's some meaning, some purpose that attaches them to the cosmos.
Or an unbiased observer.
The foundations of astrology have long been crushed. Yet paradoxically, we have always needed it, and it has helped us progress. But it's that. This desire to be in the arms of the universe.
Whether one believes in astrology or not, it remains a powerful connection with the cosmos. Part of human culture since the earliest days of civilization, it is likely to be here for a long time to come.